my department taught me zero with regard to how to run a shield or what a shield's
Here's a
for other
ballistic
than,
shield. Keep it in front of you. Yeah.
yep,
Yeah.
look through there,
Yeah.
face it that way. That's where the bad guy is. That might have been the case with Phoenix a little bit, but I can tell you, I traveled around the country teaching shield work, quote unquote. And it's kind of an underutilized piece of equipment.
Welcome to Aimpoint's Taking Aim podcast. I'm your host, Rich Nance. Here we'll take a deep dive into firearms culture and the Second Amendment lifestyle. From hunters to veterans, competitive shooters, police officers, tactical trainers, 2A advocates, and even some well-known celebrities, we'll cover it all.
Today I'm sitting down with Chris Trapp. Chris is a retired Phoenix police officer with over 25 years of law enforcement experience. Much of that time was spent on the department's SWAT team. He's also a very experienced firearms and low-light instructor. Stay tuned. This is an episode you're not going to want to miss. All right, Chris, thanks for joining us today, man.
Rich, thanks for having me.
Hey, so we go way back, right? I think it was 1997, a couple brand new Phoenix police officers trying to figure out, how we were going to save the world. Here it is now. I don't know if you're in your 50s, but I am, and it's a lot has changed since then. But I just want to talk about a lot of things with you. You have a pretty unique skill set. Tell us first about. I think you went to college at ASU, right?
I did. I went to Arizona State. Yeah.
And was that criminal justice? Like, did you know at that time you wanted to enter law enforcement?
Yeah. Early on, I knew I wanted to be a cop. I didn't know if it, in my mind, back then, I thought I wanted to be in the FBI.
Yeah.
But I didn't really know what their job responsibilities were. I just thought, at least in the movies, it was portrayed. It looked pretty cool. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Not wearing patrol garb. Yeah.
Right. So yeah, Hollywood made it look pretty sexy and romantic. But as I got closer, it became apparent that being a cop in a local municipality, or I wanted to try to make it on with Phoenix because that's where I grew up. I was born and raised.
That's cool.
In Phoenix. So I tested for just about everybody, and luckily enough, I got hired on with Phoenix, like you did.
Yeah, man. And we got hired about the same time. And when we got hired, do you remember going for that written test? And there's like thousands of people in this auditorium all sitting there, with pencils taking this written test. It's like, oh, well, this will be a good experience at least. And then, yeah, look, we both got hired. So who knew? Of course, there was a lot of openings as well, as there probably still is, right?
Yeah, I think Phoenix, or the city of Phoenix, is experiencing the same problem that every other city in America is experiencing right now, the lack of candidates, or just being understaffed
Yeah. Yeah. I
for
mean,
whatever reason.
and it's a legitimate question. Like, why would someone want to go into law enforcement right now? The last few years, the way the cops have been sort of demonized in the media and, second guessed, even though, Graham versus Connor, the law of the land says, you're not to be judged with 2020 hindsight, but that's exactly what a lot of these people are trying to do. So it's a tough time to be a cop. I do think the pendulum is swinging back a little bit more the last year or two from the guys still on the job that I've spoken to. But yeah, man, I wouldn't change it. And you and I both sort of used our training and experience that we got on the job to have other careers, right? Which was a side gig as we were working, but now it's become like giving us kind of purpose and a way to kind of give back. So before we get into that, I was with Phoenix P for a year, and then I went to California and worked for the agency where I grew up, and I was there for 25 years. But you stayed with Phoenix P the whole time, and you had an opportunity to do some awesome stuff. I loved working for Phoenix PD, but at the time, I didn't want to be in Arizona. I wanted to be back in California. And then small world, full circle. Now I want to, when I retired, I'm back in Arizona. So yeah, kind of a strange turn of events. But tell us about all the different collateral duties you had, or different special assignments that you had at Phoenix PD. Because I know it's pretty impressive. And oftentimes I'm like, man, I wonder if I could have done that cool stuff if I would have stayed there. So tell us a little bit about what you did besides patrol.
Yes, that's one of the pluses for working for a big department, right? There's a lot of opportunity for advancement or movement around the department. So I knew early on that I wanted to be on the SWAT team, right? Because I grew up playing sports my whole life. That was about the closest thing I could get to being on a team again. Obviously, the consequences are a little bit higher in law enforcement. It's not just about winning and losing. So yeah, early on, I made it a point to kind of move around the department as far as geography was concerned. I wanted to work the north side. I wanted to work the south side. I was able to be a field training officer for a couple of years, and what motivated me to do that, honestly, is uh, some of the FTOs that I saw, some of the FTOs that had direct influence on me, uh, made a positive impression. I'm like, you know what, I want to relay the information I got from them, the stuff that I had learned, onto officers coming on the department, because that happened for me. So I thought that was pretty important to kind of pay it forward, I guess.
Yeah, that's cool. And then you get to learn what it's like to be essentially a trainer, but rather than training a whole class of cops, you're training one person. But it's a good step in that direction for sure.
Yeah, it's kind of like a cross between an English teacher and a coach.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
Yeah. So I got to do that. I was pretty lucky. I enjoyed doing that. I did spend some time at our academy, at our tactical training detail, which is basically responsible for training all the patrol personnel and detectives, various things, building search, less lethal, combative stuff like that.
Yeah.
And that was an interesting experience for sure.
And you guys are having an agency that size. What is, I think I remember like 2,500 cops or something, 2,500 sworn. I don't know.
Back in, I'm trying to access my mind.
Who knows now?
I want to say it was, in the 2000s.
Okay.
It's a pretty big department at the time.
And with a department that size, you're constantly having to do advanced officer training, right? So like the department I went to in California that I just retired from a couple years ago, we had like 75 sworn, for instance. So we all train like as a group, but with a huge agency like that, you have to have people in those assignments because basically someone's doing advanced officer training of some type virtually all the time, right? Every day.
Yeah, that's the goal.
Yeah.
And again, when your department's that big too, you can they're probably not training enough, right? I think that's the case with most departments, like patrol officers or first responders don't get enough training. And that with Phoenix was the same, right? I think they train once or twice a year, not counting qualification, which probably wasn't enough, but it is what it is at the time. With the personnel that you had.
And the training budget is always the first to go anytime there's financial issues. So I know you spent a lot of time on the SWAT team there, and you were very passionate about that. Tell us a little bit about how that worked out. Like, how many years did you have on the job when you tested, and kind of what was that process like? And then tell us a little bit about your time as a SWAT guy. And basically, you were full time, so you guys were either training or activated all the time, right?
Yeah. So Phoenix SWAT, and it wasn't called SWAT, still
Sure.
not called SWAT. It's called Special Assignments Unit. I think that's the city of Phoenix,
SAE,
politically correct way of saying SWAT team.
Yep.
There's just like with any department, the SWAT team, everyone kind of looked up to them. Those are the guys that you called when they got really bad. And to me, that was always the goal. Again, that was like the pinnacle of being on a team. And that's what kind of resonated with me throughout my life and my career. So that was always a goal. At the time, Phoenix had 4 full-time teams of about 8 to 9 guys per team. And we had an incident, I'm trying to remember the year, where patrol basically was making a crisis entry, and it went pretty bad. And it led to a creation of a fifth team to help cover patrol.
Okay.
So I think that was 2005. So I tested for the SWAT team a couple different times, and not knowing the game within the game, and a lot of it was, how do I take an oral board? How do I check all the boxes? I had no idea. So I was kind of learning and asking questions as I went. So I eventually got on in 2007, and I was part of that fifth team that was created. And it was operational tempo was busy.
Yeah,
it was crazy.
Well, and so you were about a 10-year law enforcement veteran when you got on SWAT.
Yeah,
Yeah.
actually, yeah, I think it was 10 years on the dot
Oh,
when
wow.
I finally tested and got on. And that was about average time.
Hmm.
It was about 9 or 10 years. And they wanted folks that were testing to have a little bit more experience than just patrol. So any type of specialty unit, that was always a plus, or detective
Sure. Yeah.
or UC work. I think that's what they were looking for. And I get it. That makes sense. More experience you have going in
Yeah.
um, is going to help you probably.
Or like,
So
was there a patrol? I seem to remember like a patrol rifle team back in the day that I think was relatively new at the time when we started. And then that was or quick response team. I forget
yeah,
what,
QRT, I think it
yeah.
was called.
And
It's
then
changed
so,
names. I can't
okay.
keep up with the alphabet
But I mean, that
units.
was kind of a
Yeah,
good stepping stone, for instance, because you're kind of maybe on the perimeter of a situation where SWAT may be making entry or whatever they're dealing with at the breach point. And yeah, okay, well that's cool. And then what was it like being on SWAT? I mean, I know I would tease you all the time because I would tease you that it's like probably like being a fireman, like you're at Starbucks and you have nice coffee, then you go work out, and then a little bit of maybe we'll do a search warrant. But I'm sure it wasn't all sunshine and roses like that. So tell us a little bit about like what your average day might be like as a SWAT team member.
there were certainly some downtimes, just depending on the day. And the big joke was SWAT stood for sit, wait, and talk, or sit, wait, and text. But there were definitely days where the operational tempo wasn't unheard of to go scout and or execute 3 or 4 warrants in a day, and they get called out that night just because it was a big city. And I always called it a very nice laboratory to figure out what works and what doesn't work. And the city of Phoenix definitely provided that, and the cities around it. So yeah, we were quite busy. And often the time, when you look from the outside into a unit or a detail, and you think it's a certain way, and then once you get there, you're like, "Ooh, okay, that's a little different."
Different than I
That
thought.
was
Yeah.
definitely the case. There's some politics involved and things of that nature, but for the most part, like, what a great experience. Like you said, a big city, and having grown up in the city of Phoenix, um, completely different from when I was a kid as far as the growth and the amount of crime that we got to solve, good or bad. Good place to be a cop, good place to learn, good for exposure for sure. And I saw a lot of things that maybe I didn't want to see,
Yeah.
but that came with the job.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I saw a lot more stuff that first year with Phoenix than I did for probably the next 5 years at the agency that I went to, which was much smaller. But it's a trade-off because at the agency that was smaller, I learned more to be an investigator. Because with Phoenix PD, I remember it was like, if you take a stolen vehicle and you can't solve it that day, route to auto theft detail, all this different things because you have all those resources. So it's kind of pros and cons, but and also I got a chance to do some things. Like I think I was on our version of a SWAT team. I think we called it the SET team at the time. Don't even remember what that stood for, but when I had probably like 5 years on. But I mean, you have a smaller pool to choose from, right? But I did get to go to school and get to learn, get to be on some entries and learn some stuff that way. But I do always wish that I would have had the opportunity to be a full-time, SWAT team member like you for a number of years. I think that's awesome. Now on SWAT, bro, did you gravitate toward any particular areas of tactics or study? I know that you're a low light guy. I mean, you are a really knowledgeable low light instructor. Is that kind of what you gravitated toward as a new SWAT guy?
Yeah, I was given a choice when I went, I think a month or two in, because the team and the unit was expanding, and they were trying to put squads together. And I was given a choice at the time if I wanted to be entry, quote unquote, or a sniper. And knowing my personality and how I can't sit still, like it's
Same,
going to be a challenge,
same.
right? For me
Yeah,
to be here for however long
yeah,
we're doing it. I knew I couldn't sit on a roof
yeah.
for an hour or two and relay information because I'll be bouncing off the wall. So yeah, being quote unquote entry and doing stuff at ground level and a little bit closer seemed appealing to me. So that's kind of the route I took, and it was an interesting journey for sure.
Yeah, and then so how did you start to specialize in low light? And also, you're also really well versed with shield work. Were you kind of a designated shield guy on the team? And then also, in that same regard, how did you develop this passion for low light?
So the low light, that's an interesting journey because that kind of came to me the very, I'd say, early part of my career, and I was always looking for training, right? I was always looking for more. And it's nothing against our academy or anyone's academy, but once you leave there, you get a basic, skill set or basic training. And in my opinion, I think folks that are leaving the academy, or if you're new on the department, you better go get more training.
Yeah, that's
right?
the minimum. That's the minimum standard. That's not the level you should aspire to train to.
100%.
Yeah.
And I knew that. I didn't know a lot with 1 or 2 years on, for sure, but I knew I wanted to seek out more training for me on patrol. And that's kind of where I ran into the Surefire Institute. And I'm dating myself, but this is back in the late 90s.
Yeah.
And they had a couple of cats out of California that were running the Surefire Institute. I ended up taking a 1-day class on low light, like officer survival. And I got my butt handed to me in a day.
Because in the academy,
force on force.
In the academy, Chris, I remember learning like the Harry's technique, the
Sure.
the Rogers Surefire or syringe technique, neck index, FBI. But you basically use this one all the time, at least, in most of the training, and you don't really think about it too much. But how much of what we were doing as new cops was in low light, and yet we didn't know what we didn't know. We just thought these couple techniques they showed us and trained us up to like a moderate level with was gonna save us. And I guess luck may have factored in a little bit, because at some point you and I both got better. But I mean, thank God someone was looking out for us during those early days when we really didn't know how to best operate in low light situations.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you look at the stats and they haven't changed much in 20, 25 years. The majority of your officer involved shootings happen, between the hours sunset and sunrise. So the boogeyman, the bad guys come out when it's dark out. So it made sense to me. I wanted to get better. Number one, it was kind of hard shooting one-handed, shooting with handheld flashlights. And again, I'm dating myself. At the time, weapon-mounted lights weren't quite there yet. They were just starting to come on the scene. So, the flashlight technology, when I started, your SL6 was right. I can't remember that. I think it was a Streamlight. D battery, they're 2 or 3 pounds, and technology made the flashlight smaller, and techniques and tactics kind of went with that, kind of morphed into that as well.
And the output that we used to think was significant, right? And it was compared to the guys that came before us. But now, I mean, you can have a light this big that's brighter than anything we had access to back in the day. It's crazy.
100%. Yeah, 100%. So the Institute was kind of my first introduction to the law enforcement training world. So I glommed onto that quickly and learned as much as I could. And honestly, the instructors that I ran into were great coaches in that aspect. So I got to learn a lot, and then try to apply some of that to the street, right? And kind of went from there. So I definitely have a soft spot for those instructors that let me kind of ride their coattails and learn from them for years. So that's always kind of stuck with me. So that's where the low light came from. I really cut my teeth. I was able to teach through the Institute in Phoenix, in Arizona. They let me do that. So that was pretty neat. And it was important to me at the time, just because I thought that the low light arena, there wasn't a lot of instruction out there. There really wasn't. It was always technique driven, right? Like you said, the Harries, the Rogers Surefire.
Yes.
But the big question is, when do I use those techniques, right?
Exactly. It's not just learning a bunch of techniques. It's understanding which technique is most applicable in a given circumstance. And that's one of the things that I think we could have benefited from a lot more training in initially. But the academy is only so long, and you have so many high liability areas to cover. It is what it is. But like you said, the academy alone is not sufficient, nor is most agencies' advanced officer training. That also is just making sure you maintain that minimum standard that you originally, qualified for in the academy, for instance. But interesting stuff, man. And so you're still, so that was the Surefire Institute, but you have a company called Shield Spike. Tell us a little bit about that. Then we'll get into a very interesting collaboration that you have, which would be beneficial for law enforcement with Surefire, not Surefire Institute, but Surefire.
Yeah. So Shield Spike, where'd that come from? So I'll I'll always have a special place in my heart for Phoenix PD and my experiences, good or bad, right? I wouldn't change a lot with my career because it's led to where I'm at now. Whether that's good or bad, or could, you could debate that, but I wouldn't change much with my career. And when you're talking about Shield Spike and where that came from, so the time that I spent on our tactical team, again, operational tempo was pretty busy. Even talking to cats back then, it's like we were doing stuff every day.
It was a busy time, man. There was a lot of meth at that time in California. I don't know if meth was as prevalent in Phoenix as it was where I was at in California, but yeah, that was a lot of labs and stuff like that back in that time.
Yeah, in the tactics we can always talk about too.
Yeah.
That's always very interesting to
exactly.
me. But yeah, at the time, how did Shield Spike come about? And that basically came out of my time with our full-time tactical unit. And one of the stories I always relay when I'm doing demos with the tools or teaching around the country is kind of talking about where the tools came from, right? So our team or our unit with Phoenix was no different than a lot of other teams. They usually had a cooter, right, attached to them that could weld or can, make their own tools, right? I'm on a window on a warrant. I think we were supporting another squad. We're in the backyard, and my job was to take this huge bedroom window that the suspect could be in. We knew, there were some weapons in the room or whatever reason why we took the window. I was on it. I was part of the window team. So window team, real quick, is basically the idea is try to take as much of the structure from the outside safely as possible, prior to going into the structure, or it could assist, with the search if you think a suspect's in there. So whatever reason why I was there, I ended up trying to take the window with Cooter's tools, right? Basically just a soldered piece of rebar with some bicycle grips on it. And having zero training on how to do it, and back then it was just kind of learning on the job, which is really bad, but it was what it was, or is what it is. I ended up trying to take the window, and I'm bouncing off this window with this rebar. I'm like, what? So I'm literally looking at this tool. I'm in disbelief. So I'm caught up in my own OODA loop going, this isn't working. What? So my confusion and my stress turned to anger shortly afterwards. Like, this is the best we can do, right? I'm like, yeah. So instead of constantly complaining, I wanted to kind of go down that road to see if I could make something better, honestly. So I had folks in the industry, friends of mine at the time that knew metallurgy, that knew CNC machining and CAD, and basically just started drawing stuff up. And it started out as I wanted to make better tools for my guys, for me. And then it was like folks from other departments that I would talk to. It's like, where did you get that? Or what is that? And I'd end up explaining it to them. And I kind of came to the conclusion, the tools work, and folks kind of, I think they're curious, and they want them because either they don't have them or the stuff that they have isn't as good. So it came, honestly, I fell into it. I really did.
And it's simple. I mean, your tools are simple, gross motor based. I mean, you had a picture of your daughter who was just a little girl at the time, and not a picture, but a video on your website, right, where she just going around and breaking all the windows, and versus you, a big grown man slamming this thing and it won't break. Right. We used to use a baseball bat that was covered in I can't think of what the term is right now, but like your bed liner material.
Yeah, like Line-X,
like a Line-X baseball bat, and the same thing. You'd hit and then what if something happened and you end up accidentally smacking someone in the head with that thing? Then you're going to be in court answering to, when were you trained to use a baseball bat to break a window, right? So yeah, I mean, it's just very smart. I think a lot of people, Chris, when they see your tools, the Shield Spike stuff, what they'll do is they'll see it and they're like, I should have thought of that. You know what I mean? So, but a lot of the good tools in law enforcement come from people like you who are seeing a need and just frustrated. So they're like, what can I do to have a better solution for us? And then, like you said, it catches on, and then pretty soon you have a business where that maybe wasn't your intent initially.
Right. I'm a thorough believer, Rich, that some of the best ideas are probably still on the shelf somewhere, right? the best ideas in the world. And I think the hardest thing to do in any idea, to get it from an idea to concept, is it's not necessarily laziness, but it's going through the steps that no one else will. Just really being consistent on your approach to trying to develop a good tool. And it just takes time. It takes time to go from idea to concept. And there's so much that I'm still probably drowning in the ocean. I'm just treading water, trying to figure stuff out. But yeah, early on, it was just made sense at the time, especially depending on what you're doing, to have effective tools. Whether you're breaking a window or smashing a door with a ram, it's dangerous.
Exactly.
Stuff.
You don't want to be stuck at the threshold. So Chris, tell us a little bit about the tools specifically and how they're beneficial, not just for law enforcement or military applications, but even like EMS and stuff, right? Sometimes, let's say it's a hot car and there's a kid stuck in the car, you can use a purpose designed tool, right? Rather than like we used to do, pull out our asp and, break a wing window or something like that. So it has application for a lot of different things. Also, I should mention, because people that may not be from Phoenix or from Arizona might not understand the number of vehicles that are heavily tinted. And if you're doing a high risk vehicle stop or a vehicle takedown, and this is a blacked out, that's one of the most dangerous situations you can be in. So you have to have the ability to break that glass to be able to see what's inside the interior of the vehicle.
Yeah, when you're talking about breaking or porting or breaching glass, that's what the majority of my tools that are made deal with. And it's about defeating different types of glass out there, right? And glass is weird. I've seen 250, 260 pound SWAT dudes bounce off a car window with a 14-pound Halligan, a pry bar. Glass is really weird. Laminate glass is another monster that is very difficult to get through. But yeah, the Shield Spike line deals with whether you're a first responder, EMS, or just a citizen that needs to, extricate a trapped motorist, an overturned car type thing. That's what the tools kind of are geared towards, is getting through a window quickly, obviously not hurting yourself in the process, right? Because in one of the best analogies I heard, it's a borrowed phrase, I wish it was mine, with regard to tools and tactics and techniques, right? It's like, hey, I can turn off my light switch with a sledgehammer, right? Is that the best tool? Is that the best way? So we're always looking for efficiency and movement and tasks and tactics. Those tools are designed around that, honestly. Just trying to get through windows effortlessly and safely is probably our motto, I guess you could say. And that was trial and error, just figuring out what's out there, what works, what doesn't. And that's the fun part, honestly, with developing tools and tactics around it, is figuring out what works.
I remember years ago, I was writing an article on your gear there, and we went to a junkyard. The dude let us go to town, so I had a really good photographer there, and we got some cool shots. But it was and then I showed it to our guys, and they've been using it. But yeah, just really smartly designed tools that are not really apt to fail. Like, you know what I mean? It's just, they're so simple that there's not a lot of moving parts or technology into most of it. So super smart stuff. Tell us about how you came to be so involved as a shield driver, if you will, on SWAT. I know that you have some really good ideas about that. I mean, I don't want to talk about specific tactics, but I just want to talk about how a shield can be such a beneficial thing. And then maybe you can dovetail that into your collaboration with Surefire.
Yeah, so shield work, again, I'm dating myself. My department taught me zero with regard to how to run a shield or what a shield's
Here's
for.
a ballistic shield. Keep it in front of you. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Look through there.
Yeah.
Face it that way. That's where the bad guy is. That's about the extent of my training, which is fine. It's no one's fault.
Yeah.
I think with a lot of things, and you can throw shield work in there with just about everything else, is it might be someone's baby, right? Maybe some senior guys that are there, they retire, they leave, they promote. Sometimes that tactic or that expertise goes with them. Right?
Yes.
I think that might have been the case with Phoenix a little bit, but I can tell you, I travel around the country teaching shield work, quote unquote, and it's kind of an underutilized piece of equipment. I'm
Well,
not sure.
nobody wants to lug it around. You know what I mean? It's just it's cumbersome, but yeah, it can come in
Yeah.
really handy, obviously.
Yep. And again, I'll date myself. The technology back then, a level 3A shield by definition means it'll defeat or stop most of your pistol and shotgun rounds, right? Well, that was the lightest thing out there. And those things were like 30 pounds.
Yeah.
They were aluminum, they were big, they were heavy, they were cumbersome. They weren't as sexy as, having two hands on an MP5 or an
Yes.
AR-15. Totally get it. When folks are new to a team, shield work doesn't seem very sexy, right?
Yep.
So yeah, so circling back, my department really taught me close to nothing with regard to ballistic shields for whatever reason. So I had to go to Iowa. I actually paid for myself and a couple of buddies of mine. We went, and it was I think it was a DEA grant that was set up through departments in the area or in the region, and it was a couple of guys from New York, and I think one was from Boston, that were associated with a trading company called Strategos International. They basically brought these guys out from the East Coast because back then, and still it's probably pretty true for the most part, they ran shields and it looked different. I'm like, huh. So having really no knowledge of it at all, just kind of watched, listened, learned, and through repetition, I'm like, you know what? This is hard, but I see the value in it because, as you well know, cover equals time, right? When cops are getting shot at, and again, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientist, but getting hit in the face with the bullet is a little bit different than getting hit in the shield, right? So it made sense to early on to learn it, whether or not I was ever going to apply it, because back then I didn't know if I was going to get on the team. That process was always pretty competitive, but I wanted to learn it because it looked different and it looked hard.
Yeah.
Right? You're shooting with one hand.
Yeah.
Um,
looking through
so that's
this,
where that came
looking
from.
through this small slot, window. It's difficult. And then something happens, you need to reload or you need to do something you in front of the shield or behind the shield. There's all these issues. Yeah. It's, and not that it's maybe super complex, but it's something that if you don't know, you don't know. You have to be taught how to use that properly.
Yeah. So, and there's a lot of reasons why folks will give you justification for not using it, right? Well, I'm looking through a viewport. My field of vision is, went from 180 degrees to this. I'm looking through a toilet paper tube, right? It's heavy. I'm shooting one-handed. You're going to get shot in the legs. It's not foolproof. You're fighting with a pistol, all that. Yep. And some of that you can argue, some of it I totally understand with any tactic, right? With any piece of equipment, you can do it 100% correct and still come up short, right? Yeah. So with the shield work, I saw the value in it, especially when I went to our full-time team, because we used them, probably needed to use them more, I will tell you. But when things went bad, shields were always around, right? We had armored vehicles for a reason. I saw the value in it and using it, whether it was on patrol, clearing a car, or responding to a crisis entry. It just made sense to kind of layer your movement or layer your tactics with it.
Sure.
So the big thing was just trying to get everybody else on board, right, at the time.
Yeah. And so you have sort of combined your passion for shield work and your passion for low light stuff, and you've developed a really cool product that was just recently launched with Surefire. So tell us a little bit about that. This obviously is a law enforcement specific type product, but yeah.
Yeah, so I was fortunate enough to where I was asked a couple of years ago. I was at a training event in California, and some of the Surefire engineers were there, and I was doing a quick demo on shield work, how to use it, some different ways how to clear rooms, etc. And the engineers were there, and to their credit, we started talking about lights, illumination, right, for shields. And my view was it's absolutely necessary, whether you're carrying a shield or not, to have adequate light, right? Again, whether you're clearing a house or serving a warrant, approaching a car, it just made sense. And a lot of the lights that are out there now for shields are either part of the shield, so if the light breaks, you got to send the whole shield back.
Yes,
So
I remember those. Yep.
Yeah, folks are without their shields for weeks, months. Yeah. So I got together and they asked, again, to their credit, they asked, hey, if you were to design a light, what would it look like? What would you want it to do? So I sat down with the engineers several times and created a light that you could take on and off, a light that was very bright, very intuitive to use, a rechargeable system, a light that would be durable enough to withstand non-lethal training and ammunition impacts, or even the shield falling on its face.
Yeah.
And they made a great product that actually was just released and kind of debuted at the SHOT Show last week.
Yeah, I saw it there. It was very cool. I was glad because you had hinted to me that something was in the works for a while, and I'm glad to see that finally came to fruition. And I think that they were smart to contact you, but I think with your input and their ability to execute, I think you got a winner there. So I think that's going to help keep a lot of cops safe. So that's a win-win.
Yeah, and Surefire's been serving the warfighter and cops. I was a cop, right? So it made sense, and I'm obviously biased, but Surefire makes great stuff, and they listened, and they made a pretty good product, and I thoroughly believe that's going to make your first responders safer, right? You got to be able to see out there. That's objective number one, not only just to keep your feet, but to successfully identify potential threats that are downrange from you. So it makes sense. It's a no-brainer. Whether you're carrying a shield or not, you need adequate light.
Chris, talk a little bit, if you will, for someone who may be a concealed carry holder. Maybe he has a handheld flashlight or even a weapon-mounted light, but doesn't quite understand the big deal. Maybe they think that the light is to illuminate, to see, to identify a threat, and that's one purpose of a light. But I know you could talk for hours on this, so I just kind of what advice would you have to someone who has basically at ground zero with their knowledge of low light shooting, let's say with regard to a pistol? What kind of things do they need to know? What kind of light do they need to have? That type of stuff. Great
question. That's an open-ended question.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. You can dive. That's a deep dive, or potentially anyway. So yeah, for the guy or gal that's just getting into it, they're carrying a weapon for self-defense and a concealed carry, or even not concealed carry. A good handheld, I think, is a must, whether you're in law enforcement or not, because you have to supplement your own vision, right? Lighting conditions vary from place to place, whether you're going from light to dark or dark to light, and learning how to use a handheld in conjunction with a handgun is not basic. I think it's difficult. It can be a learning period, but having a handheld light, number one, that's compact and light.
Yes.
Right? And it has to have intuitive switching.
Yeah, I know you're not a fan of the hit it 3 times and it strobes and 4 times and it does something else. Yeah, you just want to be able to that instinctive activation where you just tail cap activation is probably ideal, and something that's going to go at the brightest setting immediately, or probably only, right, for a tactical light.
Yeah, and opinions vary on that, but I'll tell you from my experience, right, in law enforcement, is I don't want, when I hit the switch, whether it's on the side or in the rear of the tail cap, where the tail cap is, right, I don't want strobe, low power. I don't want a red light. I want all the lumens. I will keep it simple, right? So my light's out, my gun's out for a reason. I need to identify threats at distance in various lighting conditions. When I hit the tail cap, I want all the light, right? Because my eyes need it. Most of your gunfights, right, whether it's civilian or law enforcement, usually happen up close, right? The average, I think, for law enforcement, at least when I was looking at the stats, it's average about 3 seconds. It's over. So I don't have time to run through the myriad of lighting operations in the tail cap. You don't have time, right? What is that? Something's in the dark corner. Light comes out. You hit the switch. You get 1,500 lumens to supplement your vision. For me, I think that's a must. So all your separate switching that controls all those different modes need to be kind of separated, right? That could be a twist of a tail cap for constant on, right? Momentary the tail cap type thing. Most of your high end illumination tool manufacturers are doing that, right? Mod Light's making good stuff. Cloud Defense is making good stuff. Surefire obviously is making good stuff.
Streamlight also has been doing it forever. Yeah.
Yep. So you have 4 or 5 companies, and in my opinion, make really good handheld lights. The biggest thing I would say is train with it.
Yeah.
Figure out what works, right? Techniques. Some techniques don't work with certain lights.
Yeah.
Right.
Depending on how it's configured. Yeah. Bezel width and all that stuff.
Some of those techniques were designed around old technology.
And right? wouldn't you advise, Chris, for people to maybe initially train with a blue gun to make sure you're not, for instance, trying to get into a position and your muzzle crosses your offhand. So get those skills down with a blue gun. But then once you're confident, go to the range during daylight hours and practice these different techniques so that you have that, you've created that sort of mental blueprint so that when the time comes and you are in a low light situation, you can be confident that you're not muzzling yourself and that you're doing these techniques the way that they're designed to be done.
Yeah, 100% agree. I think if you get the adequate reps, right, and it's different for everyone to get that unconscious competency,
sure.
Right? I'm not thinking about getting into the technique. I'm concentrating on the threat that's in front of me.
Exactly. We talk about that so much, Chris. Yeah, that's huge. That's huge because if you're focused on the technique, you're not focused on being reactive to the threat that you're faced with, that's why you have to have those hard skills down so that you can be adaptable and be able to make the correct decisions on the fly. So I didn't mean to interrupt, but I had to back you up on that. That's huge.
Yeah. And for me, I think training tactics, again, I always go back to sports, right? So I use baseball as a prime example. I'm playing shortstop and someone's hit, get a frozen rope up the middle. If I have to think about crossing over my body and running towards the ball, I'm probably a half a second behind the play and the ball's in center field, right? Those movements are instinctual because of the amount of reps that I did, right? So training with a light and a handgun is no different. I got to figure out ergonomically what works best for me because body types are different, and then what light works best with that firearm, right? And then getting the techniques down and then learning when do I use those techniques, right? Based on what's in front of me. And that's something that square range training does not reveal. So sometimes simunition, right? Non-lethal training, ammunition scenarios or drills are part of that, especially in law enforcement. You figure out what works through really testing yourself against the 1%er, right? The event that doesn't happen very often. So same thing with civilians, right? You need to prepare yourself for worst case scenario, right? You're probably going to be behind as far as the reactionary gap, right? Just like cops, most of the time we're reacting to what the suspect does. I think it's in 90% of the time. Whether you're on a SWAT team, you're a first responder, civilian, you're probably going to be reactionary in the event. So learning how to, get off the X, how to move properly, how to leverage that light in the gun at the right time, hopefully.
Yeah, because the light can be a force multiplier in addition to just an illumination tool. You use the light properly, you can disrupt this dude's vision to the degree that you have now gained tactical advantage. And probably nobody is as well versed to teach that or discuss that as you. So real quick before we get into kind of last topic, which will just be on training, what I wanted to ask you is your take on like pistol mounted lights for handguns.
Yeah, I think they're great. My issue with the early iterations of the weapon mounted lights, especially with reference to pistols, was kind of like the hardware or the design. A lot of these lights aren't bad, but I think a lot of times they were created by people that didn't do our job,
Yeah. Yeah,
right?
exactly.
It was just it's easier to make this switch because we can poop out 2,000
Yep.
of them in a half hour, right?
They didn't have a
Whether or
lot of
not,
thought to the end user. Yeah.
right. And you can make the argument too, like you can make anything instinctual, right? Any piece of hardware with training. It's like, yeah, you know, that's not the best design, but I can make it work and I can be pretty efficient at it with training. I can make this instinctual. So then I get that argument, right? But I've always looked for whether it's a pistol mounted light or a handheld or a shield light, stuff that makes sense for me. So I will tell you that I'm a huge fan of remote switching, grip switches or dev group switches because it made sense for me at the time, right? You can make an argument that operating a shuttle switch or a toggle switch with your trigger fingers are optimal, but it can be done and it's not a deal breaker. Yeah, so I think they have to be bright. I think rechargeable batteries. It seems like they're getting more power out of the rechargeable. And back in the day, that wasn't the case. You had to go lift, right? So most of your pistol mounted lights um, are operating off either a CR123 or a rechargeable system. I think they're both the technology's at a point now where they're both putting out really good power. So I would say, you know, and I'm not a lumen geek per se, but I would start at 500 lumens and go up from there. And what I tell folks is my test is put pistol mounted light, either remove it from the fire or put it on a blue gun, go about 10, 15, 20 feet away and have someone else shining at you. Like if you're not
Yeah.
putting your hand up and it's
Yeah.
not, you know, it's not uncomfortable for you, then it's not bright enough, right?
Yeah. No,
Because
that makes sense.
I've said this for years, and again, based off my experience, the brighter the light, the better, right?
Yeah. Because there's a lot of people, well, what if about self-blinding and this and that? And even I asked you that before, and you're like, dude, I just want the brightest light I can get, and I'll control whether I self-blind or not. And then also simply illuminating a second time, I think was something that you told me that you could do to sort of overcome that if your vision is disrupted by your own light, maybe off a reflective surface, for instance.
Yeah, 100%. So if your eyes are dark adapted, right, and you're hitting you're discharging your light, and you hit a wall, you hit a mirror, yeah, it's gonna hurt. Turn it off, adjust, right? Add more light to what you can see to kind of get rid of that. And that's a technique error usually. It's not the light's fault. So I want the brightest thing possible because you got photonic barriers out there, right? Um, Distance, street lights. You might have to penetrate smoke, um, dust,
Different, varying
lighting
lighting
conditions.
conditions from one room to
Yeah,
the next. Yeah. I remember
100%.
that was one of the big factors that you told me as far as having a light that really penetrates, because you need to be able to see through a room that maybe is more lit into a room that's darker. So good stuff there, dude. I won't make you go on because I know you just have so much good information there. You can talk about that all day. As we wind down here, tell us a little bit about what things you're teaching now and who you're training with, what company you're training with.
So I think about 2011, I started teaching through Craft International, which was created by Chris Kyle. Everyone knows Chris. Unfortunately, he was killed. That company essentially went from Craft International to Tacflow Academy, and Tacflow's filled with a bunch of cops, and they have some military folks too. They go around and teach, you know, various topics. And Tacflow honestly is known for having a really good uh, aerial platform program, large venue, you know, 50 cal sniper, a lot of precision work for law enforcement. Um, I was kind of brought in to help teach interior movement, CQB, I guess you could say, and a lot of that is shield work. And it's been a very interesting journey, and I think that's honestly where a lot of these products came from is from number one operational experience, but two training for all those years and being a student too at a lot of these classes, because you get folks in these classes that can teach you a thing or two as well. So I was always learning, and I still am, which is the fun part of teaching. Yeah, so I've been spending the majority of my retirement, and not too much, traveling around the country, and my focus right now is honestly is shield work, and that's at the first responder level, but also at the quote unquote the SWAT team level, because it's not a SWAT thing. Shields are not a SWAT thing. It's
more and more they're
definitely
accessible
law
to patrol officers. Yeah, for active shooter response,
100%.
things like that. Yeah.
Yep.
No, that's great. Chris, where can people go to find out more information about what you have coming up, or if they're interested in purchasing some of your Shield Spike products, for instance?
Yeah, so my website, shieldspike.com, and then the training company who I'm currently teaching for is Tacflow.com.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much, Chris, for being here. I certainly appreciate it. And folks, that's a wrap for this episode with Chris Trapp. If this episode resonated with you, be sure and let us know in the comments. And please don't forget to like and subscribe to Aimpoint's Taking Aim podcast. We'll see you next time.